Parendo's paradox shows how two losing strategies can combine into a winning one. On the surface, it sounds impossible. If something doesn't work, and then you pair it with another thing that also doesn't work, how can the result be better? But this isn't a trick. It's a real effect that shows up in game theory, physics, and even economics. The key is in how the systems interact and the way outcomes shift when you alternate between them. The paradox comes from a game designed by physicist Juan Parando. It began as a way to explain a concept in physics called Brownian ratchets, where random motion can produce order, but it quickly took on a life of its own because it challenges how we think about probability and success. In the simplest version of the game, there are two separate games, Game A and Game B. Game A is easy to explain. You flip a biased coin. This coin lands heads 49% of the time and tails 51% of the time. Every time you get heads, you win $1. Tails, you lose $1. Over time, you expect to lose because the coin is tilted just slightly against you. The edge is small, but in the long run, it drains your money. That's a losing game. Game B is more complicated. It uses two coins. The coin you flip depends on your current amount of money. If your total is divisible by 3, you use a very bad coin. This one wins only 9% of the time. The rest of the time, you lose. But if your total is not divisible by 3, you use a better coin. This one gives you a win 74% of the time, so you have one terrible coin and one good one, and which one you get depends on your money. Even though the good coin seems strong, the structure makes Game B a losing game too. The bad coin comes up often enough to sink your progress. Now here's where it gets strange. If you alternate between Game A and Game B in the right sequence, you start winning over time. You could play A-B-B or A-A-B, or even choose randomly between them. The exact sequence affects the result, but many patterns lead to gains. Each game by itself pulls you down, but together, they lift you up. This is the paradox. Losing plus losing equals winning. To understand how this works, it helps to look deeper into how the games behave. Game A chips away at your money slowly. Game B is sneakier. It tricks you into using that terrible coin often by setting up your money to be divisible by 3. That's how you end up with a 9% coin more than you'd like. The trick of combining the games breaks this cycle. By playing Game A, you shift your money total away from the danger zone. That means that when you switch back to Game B, you're more likely to land on the better coin. So instead of being trapped in a loop where you keep hitting the bad coin, you get more of the good one. In this way, the slight loss from Game A acts like a kind of reset that lets Game B work better. Think of it like walking on a steep hill. If you try to walk straight up, you slip and fall. That's playing just Game B. If you walk sideways along the slope, you go nowhere. That's Game A. But if you zigzag across the hill, shifting directions at the right time, you can move upward. That's what happens when you alternate the games. The combination gives you a path that isn't obvious from either part on its own. This kind of effect shows up in other places too. In finance, an investor might hold two assets that both have negative returns. But if those assets are negatively correlated, meaning when one goes down, the other often goes up, the right switching strategy can make the whole portfolio profitable. It's not magic. It's how timing and structure interact with risk. In biology, similar patterns emerge. Some treatments in medicine work better when cycled than when used alone. A drug might stop working over time because the body adapts. But if you switch between two drugs, even if each one is weak on its own, the body doesn't adapt as fast. That keeps the treatment effective longer. Even in social systems, the idea can apply. A worker might face burnout doing a hard job every day, but alternating between two different tough tasks, each with its own rhythm, can reduce fatigue. The change itself becomes a benefit. The idea behind Parando's paradox is that context matters. It's not just what a move does on its own. It's also how it affects the system you're part of. When you take an action, it shifts your state. That state then shapes the next outcome. So two bad moves can set up the next step in a way that makes it good. It's about the sequence, not just the parts. To see it another way, picture a ball rolling on a surface with bumps and dips. If you push the ball straight forward, it gets stuck in the dips. That's like a losing game. But if you nudge it in a zigzag, the ball may keep. It gets stuck in the dips. That's like a losing game. But if you nudge it in a zigzag, the ball may keep moving. The extra motion helps it escape the traps. This is how alternating strategies can bypass the pitfalls that each one falls into when used alone. The paradox doesn't work in every case. The games have to be set up in just the right way. If the coins are too unfair, or the switching is off, the result is still a loss. But the main idea stays the same. The whole can behave better than its parts. You can't just look at individual moves and judge them. You have to see the system as a whole, and how one step changes the landscape for the next. In practical terms, this means we sometimes misjudge strategies. A person might try something and see it doesn't work. Then they try something else and get the same bad result, so they assume neither will help. But if they tried combining them, they might find success. This could happen in learning, business, or problem solving. The answer isn't always in finding the best move, but in finding the right mix. Parendo's paradox reminds us that timing and sequence shape outcomes. When we judge actions in isolation, we miss patterns. Sometimes success comes not from strength, but from the way weak steps line up. This can feel strange, but it's a pattern that plays out again and again in real systems. The lesson is not to ignore losses, but it's a pattern that plays out again and again in real systems. The lesson is not to ignore losses, but to look deeper into how they interact. A losing step may still be a useful tool if it opens the door to a better path. The way forward might be hidden in the space between moves. That's where the paradox lives, at the edge of logic, where the pieces don't make sense on their own, but come together to reveal something more. Newcomb's paradox is a famous problem in decision theory. It involves a simple choice, but the reasoning behind the choice creates a conflict between two common approaches to decision-making. The paradox starts with a scenario involving two boxes and a powerful predictor. Imagine you are standing in front of two boxes. Box A is clear and always contains $1,000. Box B is opaque and contains either $1 million or nothing. A highly reliable predictor, known for being right almost every time, has already made a prediction about your choice. If the predictor thought you would take only box B, then it put $1 million inside it. If the predictor thought you would take both box A and box B, then it left box B empty. You now have a choice. Take both boxes, or take only box B. The first way to think about this is by using expected utility. This approach suggests that you should take only box B. The predictor has been reliable in the past, almost always getting it right. If you take only box B, you are likely to get $1 million. If you take both boxes, the predictor probably saw that coming and left box B empty, leaving you with only $1,000. But another way to think about it is through dominance reasoning. This says you should always choose the option that gives you more money no matter what. In this case, if box B is empty, then taking both boxes gets you $1,000, while taking only box B gets you nothing. If box B has $1 million, then taking both boxes gets you $1,000,000,000,000, while taking only box B gets you nothing. If box B has $1 million, then taking both boxes gets you $1 million, while taking only box B gets you $1 million. In either case, taking both boxes gives you more money. So using this logic, you should take both boxes. These two lines of reasoning point to different choices. One says take only box B, the other says take both boxes. That's the paradox. You can't use both methods at the same time without running into a contradiction. Each method seems valid on its own, but they give opposite answers when applied to the same problem. The power of Newcomb's paradox comes from how it forces you to choose between these two ways of thinking. Each method feels right, but they can't both be correct here. That tension has sparked long debates among philosophers, economists, and mathematicians. To understand this better, picture a slightly different version of the problem. Let's say you walk into a room and see a robot holding a clipboard. It tells you that it has already made its prediction and placed money in the boxes. You know this robot has predicted other people's choices in this same setup hundreds of times, and it has been right every time. It tells you that it will not change anything now. Your decision comes after everything has been set. Now think about how you might reason. If you truly believe the robot is accurate and that your decision was predicted before you walked in, then your best chance at the $1 million is to take only box B. Past results suggest that those who took only box B walked away with the money. Those who took both got less. So even though you already know what is in box A, $1,000, you may feel it's better to leave it behind. But this doesn't sit right with everyone. Some people feel that the idea of a predictor being that accurate is not realistic. They say, your choice is made now, and nothing can change the contents of the boxes. So if box B has $1 million, then you get even more by taking both. If it doesn't, at least you get $1,000 from box A. They think it doesn't make sense to ignore that guaranteed money. Others push back, saying the question isn't about whether the predictor is magic or not. It's about what kind of reasoning gets you the best outcome. Even if you don't know how the predictor works, the results speak for themselves. The pattern shows that one boxing tends to lead to more money. So if you care about results, you should follow what works. Now take this thinking and apply it to a real-life situation. Let's say you're trying to decide whether to trust your gut feeling or follow a calculated plan. Maybe you're trying to decide whether to trust your gut feeling or follow a calculated plan. Maybe you're choosing between starting a business or taking a safe job offer. Your gut tells you that taking the risk will lead to a big payoff, and you have a strong sense that success will follow if you commit. But the safe job gives you a guaranteed income. The predictor and newcomer's paradox is like your future self, imagining what choice will lead to the best long-term outcome. If you believe your gut is like the predictor, then going all in, choosing only box B, might feel right. You trust that confidence leads to the result you want. But the safe job, like box A, gives you something guaranteed, and if the big payoff still happens, taking both seems like the better move. This shows how the paradox connects to questions about free will, trust, and how we make choices. One side suggests your current choice influences the past, or at least, it lines up with what was already predicted. The other side says your choice has no effect on the past, so take what you can now. There are also arguments about how much control you really have. If the predictor is so good at knowing what you'll do you actually have a choice? Or are you just playing out something that was already decided? Some say that this doesn't mean you're not free. It just means your actions are part of a pattern that can be known ahead of time. Others argue that if your choice is truly free, no one should be able to predict it with high accuracy. Then there's the question of what it means to cause something. If your choice now seems to cause the money to be in the box before you chose, how does that work? Does time work differently in this problem? Or does it just mean we need to rethink what causing something really means? Some people try to avoid the paradox by saying the setup is flawed. They claim that a perfect predictor can't exist, or that the predictor's success is based on a trick. Can't exist, or that the predictor's success is based on a trick. Others say the whole point of the paradox is to make you see that our usual ideas about time, choice, and reason don't always fit together. In the end, Newcomb's paradox is not just a puzzle about money and boxes. It's a way to explore deeper questions. What kind of reasoning do we trust? What does it mean to make a good choice? And how do we handle uncertainty when the stakes are high? The debate continues because the paradox touches on so many areas. It brings in logic, psychology, probability, and even philosophy of mind. And because the problem is simple to state but hard to solve, it keeps pulling people in. Whether you're a one-boxer or a two-boxer, the paradox shows that our ideas about choice are more complex than they first seem. Two friends each receive a gift box with a necktie inside. They don't know how much their own tie is worth, but they do know this. One tie costs twice as much as the other. The friend with the more expensive tie wins a small prize from a third person. But here's the twist. Before opening the boxes, one friend says to the other, "It doesn't matter which tie I get. I always expect to come out ahead if we trade ties." This seems strange. How can you expect to gain from a trade if the same logic applies to the other person? If both expect to benefit, where trade if the same logic applies to the other person? If both expect to benefit, where does that benefit come from? Let's walk through the reasoning slowly. Suppose I open my box and see a tie. I don't know if it's the cheap one or the expensive one. If it's the cheap one, then yours is worth twice as much. If it's the expensive one, then yours is worth half as much. In other words, there's a 50% chance I'll gain if I trade and a 50% chance I'll lose. So far, that sounds fair. Now imagine my tie is worth $20. Then either you have the $10 tie or you have the $40 tie. If we assume both options are equally likely, then if I trade, I could end up with a $10 tie or a $40 tie. That averages out to $25, which is more than the $20 I started with. That makes it seem like a good idea to trade. That's the paradox. From this logic, it looks like I should always trade no matter what. But you can make the same argument. So both of us should want to trade, thinking we'll come out ahead. But we can't both come out ahead by swapping. That's not possible. We have the same two ties. How can we each expect to gain? That's the puzzle. And it feels tight. It seems logical, but it breaks down once you poke at the assumptions. Go back to the part where we said there's a 50% chance I have the cheap tie and a 50% chance I have the expensive one. That feels fair. But where does that probability come from? We assumed it. We said either my tie is worth half yours or twice yours, and treated both as equally likely. But that's a mistake. Once I know my tie is worth $20, the odds that the other tie is $10 or $40 depend on how the prices were picked in the first place. If ties could be any value at all, then there's no real way to say the $10 and $40 outcomes are equally likely. Maybe one is more probable than the other. Suppose the person handing out the ties only chooses between $10 and $20 ties. Then, if I see a $20 tie, I must have the expensive one. That makes the other one a $10 tie. Trading would be a loss. In this case, there's no paradox. Or suppose the tie values are picked from a wider set of prices. Maybe the cheaper one is chosen randomly from a list of values like $10, $20, $30 and so on, and then the expensive one is exactly double that. Then the odds change again. The problem with the paradox is it pretends to know something about probabilities without checking how those probabilities were created. It treats the tie values like they're floating without rules. But if we want to talk about likelihoods, we have to say how the values were assigned. Once we do that, the expected gain from trading can vanish. Let's try a concrete setup. Say there's a hat filled with slips of paper, and each one has a number 10, 20, 40, 80, up to 1280. That's 10 numbers. A pair of values is chosen by picking one at random and calling it the cheaper tie. Then the expensive one is double that. Now suppose you open your box and find a $160 tie. What's the chance it's the expensive one? Look at the list. The $160 tie could be the cheap tie if the pair was $160 and $320. Be the cheap tie if the pair was $160 and $320. That means $160 is the cheap one. Or it could be the expensive one from the pair $80 and $160. So the two relevant pairs are 80 to 160 and 160 to 320. But the number 160 appears in both. So to find the chance your tie is the expensive one, ask, among the pairs that contain 160, how many times is it the larger number? In this list, it's part of 80 to 160 and 160 to 320. In one, it's the cheap tie, and in the other, it's the expensive one. Each pair is equally likely, so your $160 tie has a 50% chance of being the expensive one. Seems like the paradox is still alive. Trade and you might end up with a tie worth either $80 or $320. That averages to $200, and that beats the $160 you started with. So again, it looks like a good deal to trade. But here's the trick. That's not the full story. What happens if you draw a tie worth $1,280? The trick. That's not the full story. What happens if you draw a tie worth 1280s? That's the top of the list. There is no $2,560 tie in the game, so if you have the 1280 tie, it must be the expensive one. That means you're holding the better tie. Trading would only lose you money. Same with the lowest end. If you get the $10 tie, there is no cheaper one in the game, so you must have the cheap tie. Suddenly, the symmetry breaks. At the edges, you can no longer assume the other tie might be double or half yours. The structure of the game matters. The probabilities lean in one direction or the other, depending on where your value sits in the list. As soon as the range of possible tie values is known or limited, you can no longer claim the expected value of the other tie is more than yours. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. It depends on what you know about how tie values are assigned. Without that, you can't say the odds are 50 to 50. The paradox plays a trick. It invites you to use symmetry and expected value without grounding them in a specific setup. It makes it look like you're reasoning when you're actually assuming. Let's take another route. Imagine you and I play this game. We agree the cheap tie is always $100. The expensive one is always $200. I pick one at random and hand it to you. You get a box with a tie. You open it and see $100. You now know the other must be worth $200. That's fine. But now imagine I don't tell you the price choices ahead of time. You open your box and see $100. You think, maybe the other is $50 or $200. Average of that is $125. That's better than what I have. So you think trading will gain you money, but in reality there is no $50 tie. That means your estimate of the average is based on a false option. The paradox arises when you imagine values that don't exist in the game. You think the other tie might be $50, even if $50 isn't one of the choices. That false possibility pulls down the average of your current tie. It creates an illusion of gain. That's where expected value gets dangerous. If your expectation includes impossible cases, then it doesn't reflect reality. Let's say it again. The key flaw is assuming the other tie has a value either half or double yours, and that both are equally likely. That's only true if the value distribution supports it. If not, your reasoning falls apart. In short, the necktie paradox isn't really a paradox. It's a warning. Don't trust expected value calculations that float in midair. Anchor them to something. Check where the numbers come from. Look for the limits. Without that, you're just guessing. And sometimes guessing feels like logic, but it isn't. A pilot is flying a commercial airliner across a well-traveled road. The skies are clear. The autopilot is on. The road is familiar. The procedures are routine. Yet something goes wrong. The pilot, relying on automation and expecting everything to be just as it always is, misses a critical detail. The mistake builds. There's no clear warning, no big moment, just a small issue, not caught in time, that leads to a dangerous situation. This is the navigation paradox. The navigation paradox is the idea that as navigation tools become better, safer, and more reliable, the risk of accidents doesn't drop in the way you'd expect. In some cases, it increases. That sounds backwards. But when you look at what happens when people will rely too much on navigation systems, the paradox starts to make sense. Modern navigation tools reduce uncertainty. Pilots and drivers used to rely on visual cues, maps, and knowledge of terrain. That took skill. It also kept them more engaged. GPS and automated systems make it easier to get from point A to point B. They reduce workload, but they also change the way people behave. One example comes from aviation. Pilots fly aircraft with powerful onboard computers. The systems manage speed, altitude, heading, and more. Most of the time, they do this well. But the more reliable the systems are, the less the pilots intervene. They monitor instead of fly. That creates a gap between the pilot's knowledge and the machine's actions. This isn't just theory. Look at the crash of Air France Flight 447 in 2009. The aircraft flew into a storm. The P.2 tubes, which measure air speed, iced over. The autopilot disengaged. The aircraft handed control back to the pilots, but by then, the pilots had not been actively flying the plane. They didn't recognize the stall. They made control inputs that made things worse. The plane crashed into the Atlantic. All 228 people on board died. The crew had relied on automation. When it failed, they weren't ready. The paradox shows up in driving too. GPS navigation is reliable. Drivers follow it without question. But when the GPS gives a wrong route or doesn't reflect road conditions, drivers still follow it. They defer to the device instead of using their judgment. There are cases of trucks getting stuck under low bridges, buses being routed onto dirt paths, and tourists driving into lakes. These aren't just one-off stories. They reflect a pattern of trust placed in the system, even when the evidence on the ground says otherwise. It's easy to say these are mistakes made by careless people, but that misses the point. The systems are designed to make things easier, and they do. But the ease creates overconfidence. The more you trust the system, the less you double-check. That's the heart of the paradox. Better systems lead to better outcomes until they don't. And when they fail, people aren't always ready to take over. In maritime navigation, large vessels use electronic chart display and information systems, ECDS. These systems give detailed maps, position data, and alerts. They reduce the need for paper charts and manual plotting. But ships have run aground because officers relied too much on ECDS. In some cases, they didn't check the chart scale. In others, they ignored alarms. The screen gave a false sense of control. The technology was sound. The use of it was not. The paradox doesn't argue against using advanced navigation tools. The systems work. They reduce accidents overall. But they change the way humans interact with the task. People adapt to tools. The systems work. They reduce accidents overall. But they change the way humans interact with the task. People adapt to tools. They offload attention. They become passive. And passive control doesn't catch edge cases. It doesn't spot the one time the GPS leads you wrong, or the one time the autopilot gives up when you least expect it. Think about a mountain hiker using a GPS watch. You least expect it. Think about a mountain hiker using a GPS watch. The trail isn't marked. The device shows a route. The hiker follows it, even when the terrain looks wrong. Without the watch, the hiker might stop and look around, take note of the sun, the slope, the path. With the watch, there's no pause. Just follow the line. If the battery dies or the route is wrong, the hiker might be in trouble. Not because the tool failed, but because the tool made them stop thinking. There's also the problem of dekilling. When people don't use a skill, they lose it. A pilot who rarely hand flies an aircraft might struggle when they have to. A sailor who relies on GPS may no longer know how to navigate by compass and chart. A driver who follows voice directions may not know the layout of their own town. The skill fades. That wouldn't matter if the systems were perfect, but they aren't. And when they fail, the person in charge needs to take over, often fast and under stress. Imagine a delivery driver working a road they've never driven before. Their phone shows turn-by-turn directions. They follow them, but the map doesn't show a recent road closure. They take a turn and end up on a one-way street heading the wrong direction. If the driver knew the city layout, they might have questioned the turn, but they didn't need to know the layout. Until they did. That's the navigation paradox again. There's also a subtle pressure to trust the system even when you doubt it. In a group setting, like a ship's bridge or a cockpit, a person might see something that feels off. But the system shows all green. The automation says everything is fine. Speaking up becomes harder. The system has more authority than the human. People defer to the tech. That's dangerous, especially when the system is wrong and no one checks. There's a case from a commercial ship entering a busy port. The officer on watch noticed the course line went over a shallow area, but the ECDS didn't raise an alarm. The master trusted the line. The ship ran aground. Later investigation showed the chart scale had been wrong. The officer had noticed, but they didn't insist. The system didn't back them up, so they said nothing. These situations are hard to train for. You can teach someone how to use a system. You can show them what happens when it fails. But the real problem is behavior. You can't easily teach people to stay alert when everything seems fine. You can't teach judgment with a checklist. You can encourage questioning, promote active monitoring, and build habits. But those take time and experience. Some organizations now require regular hand-flying practice for pilots. Others insist on using paper backups or running scenarios where automation fails. These are ways to keep the human in the loop. Not as a backup, but as a partner to the system. That's the right way to think about it. The person isn't there just in case. They're there all the time, watching, thinking, ready to step in. Navigation tools are useful. They've made travel safer, faster, and easier, but they change how people think and act. The paradox is that the safer the system, the more people trust it, and the more they trust it, the less prepared they are when it breaks. That's not a reason to abandon technology. It's a reason to use it with care. Always assume it can fail. Stay engaged. Stay curious. Know the route. Don't just follow the line. Morton's fork is a situation where a person faces two options and both lead to the same negative outcome. The phrase comes from the 15th century, named after John Morton, who was Lord Chancellor to King Henry VII. He used a kind of logic to justify taking money from both the rich and the poor. If someone lived modestly, he assumed they must be saving money, so they could afford to give to the king. If someone lived extravagantly, he assumed they clearly had enough money, so they should give as well. Either way, the outcome was the same. The person had to pay. That's the essence of Morton's fork. No matter which path you take, you're trapped. It's not a trick or an illusion. It's a type of reasoning that boxes people in. This kind of thinking appears in many places today. Government, workplaces, education, and even personal relationships. It often hides behind logic, but when you look closely, it's about control, not choice. Picture an employee in a company that's trying to cut costs. If they work late every night, their manager might say they're inefficient and can't get their job done during normal hours. If they leave on time, their manager might say they lack commitment. Either way, the employee is criticized. They're stuck. That's Morton's fork. Or consider a student applying for university. If they list many extracurricular activities, an admissions officer might say they're spread too thin and don't focus. If they list only a few, the officer might say they lack initiative. Either approach can be used to deny the application. The student can't win. The outcome is already tilted against them, and the reasoning is built to justify it, not to question it. This type of reasoning isn't always obvious. It's usually disguised as fairness. People will say we judge every case on its own merits, but that's not what happens. Instead, the person in power uses the same logic to justify opposing judgments. That's what Morton did. He made it seem like he was being reasonable, but he wasn't. He just wanted the money. In modern business settings, Morton's fork often appears in performance reviews. Say an employee speaks up in meetings, they might be told they're too assertive or dominate the conversation. If they stay quiet, they might be told they don't contribute. Either way, the manager builds a case against them, not because of what they do, but because the outcome, discipline, demotion, or dismissal was already decided. The reasoning is just a tool to get there. This tactic is hard to challenge because it looks rational on the surface. Each part of the fork seems logical. If someone spends too much, they must have money. If they spend too little, they must be hiding money. But the logic only works if you already believe the person is guilty. You don't question the goal, you just justify it. In law enforcement, this kind of logic can be dangerous. If someone runs from police, they must be guilty. If they cooperate too much, they might be trying to hide something. The interpretation always bends toward guilt. It removes the possibility of neutrality or innocence. The person is judged not on evidence, but on the shape of the trap they're in. Morton's fork can also show up in healthcare. A patient who insists they're ill may be called a hypochondriac. A patient who downplays symptoms may be seen as hiding something serious. In both cases, the doctor might dismiss them. The fork doesn't come from medical facts, but from assumptions. The logic works backward from the doctor's belief, not forward from the patient's condition. In politics, Morton's fork helps leaders make unpopular decisions look justified. A country that increases defense spending during peace is seen as preparing for threats. If they reduce spending, they're seen as weak and inviting danger. Either way, the decision is framed to support the same conclusion. More control, more power, fewer questions. Public debate gets reduced to two choices that lead to the same place. In families, it might take the form of emotional pressure. A parent might say, "If you love me, you'll do what I ask." But if the child refuses, they're accused of being cold or selfish. If they agree, they're seen as weak or dependent. The child is caught. The fork isn't about love or independence. It's about control. What makes Morton's fork effective is its subtlety. It doesn't shout. It's about control. What makes Morton's fork effective is its subtlety. It doesn't shout. It doesn't force. It leads you calmly toward a conclusion and makes you feel like you walked there yourself. But the road was already chosen. The fork only gives the illusion of choice. Even technology can create versions of this trap. A social media platform might say, if you post a lot, you're addicted. If you post nothing, you're antisocial. The platform sets the rules for what's normal and then uses those rules to judge users no matter what they do. The result is always the same. The user is wrong and the platform stays in control. In hiring, Morton's fork appears when a company says they want diversity but rejects candidates for not being a culture fit. If someone brings a different perspective, they're seen as disruptive. If they try to blend in, they're seen as lacking authenticity. Either way, they're filtered out. The company's stated goal and their actual practice contradict each other, but the logic bends to fit. In public discussions, this reasoning often shuts down debate. If someone questions a policy, they might be called uninformed. If they know too much, they're called biased. If they stay neutral, they're accused of lacking values. No matter how they speak, their view can be dismissed. The fork isn't about truth, it's about removing disagreement. What makes all these examples alike is that the person in the weaker position can't escape. The fork limits the field of play. It removes the middle ground and shapes every move to look wrong. It's not just unfair, it's designed that way. Morton's original idea was simple: get money for the crown no matter what. The logic followed the goal, not the other way around. That part hasn't changed. Today, Morton's fork shows up wherever power needs to explain itself without being questioned. It's not about reason. It's about control that sounds reasonable. The best way to spot a Morton's fork is to look for outcomes that never change, even when behavior does. If every action leads to the same judgment, then logic isn't being used to find the truth. It's being used to trap someone. In real life, people often don't know they're caught until it's too late. The logic seems solid until you notice the pattern. That's when you see it. No matter what you do, the answer is already in place. Imagine you're on a game show. You stand in front of 3 closed doors. Behind one of them is a car. Behind the other 2 are goats. You want the car. The host, Monty Hall, asks you to pick a door. You choose door 1. Monty, who knows what's behind all the doors, opens door 3. Behind it, there's a goat. He then gives you a choice. Do you want to stay with door 1 or switch to door 2? At first, it feels like it shouldn't matter. There are 2 doors left. One has a car. One has a goat. It shouldn't matter. There are 2 doors left. One has a car. One has a goat. Seems like it's 50-50. So switching or staying should make no difference. But this feeling is wrong. The odds are not equal. They were never equal. This is the heart of the Monty Hall problem. Let's walk through it slowly. When you first pick a door, you have a 1 in 3 chance of picking the car. That means there's a 2 in 3 chance the car is behind one of the other 2 doors. This is simple probability, nothing tricky, just 1 car and 3 doors. Let's say you pick door 1. That's your first move. There's a 1 in 3 chance the car is behind door 1. There's a 2 in 3 chance the car is behind door 2 or door 3. Now Monty opens one of the other 2 doors. He never opens the door with the car. He always shows you a goat. This is key. Monty knows where the car is. He will never open the door with the car by accident. Suppose the car is behind door 2. You pick door 1. Monty opens door 3 to show a goat. If you switch to door 2, you win the car. Suppose the car is behind door 3. You pick door 1. Monty opens door 2 to show a goat. Again, if you switch, you win the car. In both of these cases, switching gives you the car. These are the 2 and 3 cases where your first guess was wrong. Monty helps you by removing one bad option. He cannot open the door with the car, so he points you at the only other unopened door. If you switch, you now choose from the 2/3 group. Now consider the one time you win by staying. That happens only if your first guess was right. You pick door 1. The car is behind door 1. Monty opens either door 2 or door 3 to show a goat. You stay and you win. That's the 1 in 3 case. 1 time out of 3, you pick the car from the start. In the other 2 cases, you picked a goat, and switching would win the car. You win 2 out of 3 times if you switch. You win 1 out of 3 times if you stay. The math is simple, but the idea feels strange. Let's try it with numbers. Suppose you play this game 300 times. You always pick door 1. The car is placed randomly. That means about 100 times, the car is behind door 1. About 100 times, it's behind door 2. About 100 times, it's behind door 3. In the 100 times the car is behind door 1, you win if you stay. Monty opens one of the other 2 doors. You stick with door 1 and get the car. In the other 200 games, the car is behind door 2 or 3. You pick door 1, but you're wrong. Monty opens the door with a goat. If you switch, you get the car. You win 200 times by switching. You only win 100 times by staying. That's a 2-to-1 advantage. It doesn't feel right, but the numbers show it. You're better off switching. People often don't believe this at first, even smart people. Some assume Monty might open a door at random, but the rules matter. Monty always opens a door with a goat, he never opens the door with the car, and he always offers the choice to switch. If he didn't follow those rules, the odds would change. It helps to look at extreme cases. Say there are 100 doors. One has a car. You pick door 1. There's a 1 in 100 chance you pick the car. There's a 99 in 100 chance the car is behind one of the other doors. Monty, who knows everything, opens 98 other doors. All of them have goats. He leaves only door 1, your pick, and door 42 unopened. Now do you switch? Of course you switch. The chance that the car is behind door 1 is still 1 in 100. The chance it's behind door 42 is now 99 in 100. Monty didn't pick door 42 at random. He left it closed on purpose. The logic is the same in the 3-door version, just smaller numbers. When Monty removes one wrong door, he doesn't even the odds. He reveals information. He shifts the weight toward the door you didn't pick. Some people think Monty is trying to trick you, but that's not the case. He isn't trying to help or hurt you. He just follows the rules. He opens a door with a goat. He offers a switch. The structure of the game does the rest. If you simulate the game on a computer, the results make it clear. Run it 1,000 times, always stay, and you'll win about 33% of the time. Always switch, and you'll win about 66% of the time. The gap is too large to ignore. Even after all this, it still might feel wrong. That's normal. The brain wants to treat the 2 remaining doors as equal, but they aren't. The first choice had a 1 in 3 chance. That never normal. The brain wants to treat the 2 remaining doors as equal, but they aren't. The first choice had a 1 in 3 chance. That never changed. Monty's action only confirms the other doors were more likely to begin with. Let's do another walkthrough. You pick door 1. 1/3 chance of being right, 2/3 chance of being wrong. Car is behind door 2 or 3. If the car is behind door 2, Monty opens door 3. If the car is behind door 2, Monty opens door 3. If the car is behind door 3, Monty opens door 2. Either way, he opens the door with a goat. Then you switch. You get the car. Only if your first guess was correct do you lose by switching. That's 1 case out of 3. Monty's choice isn't random. It's guided by what's behind the doors. That makes the odds lean toward the switch. He filters out a bad door. He does this every time. That gives you more power than you started with. When you first pick, when Monty opens a door, he's not guessing. He's showing you something. That changes the situation. You now have more information. The game isn't about luck anymore. It becomes a test of whether you trust the situation. You now have more information. The game isn't about luck anymore. It becomes a test of whether you trust the numbers. People who test this in the real world almost always become convinced. Try it with 3 cards and a friend. 1 card is an ace. The others are jokers. Your friend lays them face down. You pick one. They peek at the cards, then show you a joker from the other 2. They offer you the switch. Track your wins over time. You peek at the cards, then show you a joker from the other 2. They offer you the switch. Track your wins over time. You'll see the pattern. What starts as a gut feeling turns into a clear advantage. The game is built to fool your intuition, but it rewards the player who understands how information works. The Monty Hall problem shows how easy it is to confuse chance and choice. It's not about guessing better. It's about realizing what new information means. Monty's move isn't neutral. It's a message. If you listen to it, you win more often. The Mandarin paradox is simple to state, but hard to solve. It goes like this. Imagine a person who lives in a remote village. They speak only Mandarin and have never learned any other language. One day, someone hands them a sheet of paper filled with English sentences and asks them to sort the sentences into 2 piles, those that are grammatically correct and those that are not. They cannot understand a single word, yet somehow they do the task perfectly. How is this possible? This paradox lives in the space between language and understanding. It's based on the idea that someone might follow rules perfectly without knowing what the words mean. This person in the village does not speak English, and yet they act as if they understand English grammar. It seems like they know something they cannot possibly know. That's the paradox. To make this clearer, think of a game. You sit in a locked room. Outside the door, people slip you symbols on pieces of paper. You look up the symbols in a big rule book. The rule book tells you what to write in response and how to send that paper back through the door. You follow the rules exactly. You do not know what the symbols mean. They could be questions, jokes, or insults. You do not understand the language at all. You just manipulate symbols. Yet to the person outside the door, it looks like you are having a real conversation in their language. This scenario is not imaginary. It is a version of what's called the Chinese room argument, made famous by the philosopher John Searle. The Mandarin paradox is just a twist. Instead of English in a rulebook, the person in the story is a native Mandarin speaker dealing with English. But the problem stays the same. Can someone appear to understand a language without understanding it at all? We usually think of understanding as something inside the mind. When you hear a sentence, you don't just hear the words. You know what the sentence means. You can picture it. You can react. That's why it feels so strange when someone who doesn't speak a language can still sort sentences correctly. Where does their understanding come from? Do they even need understanding, or can they just follow rules? Let's take it further. Say you design a computer that can pass a grammar test in English. You feed it sentences. It labels them as correct or incorrect. Its answers match those of an English teacher. But this computer never learned English in any normal way. It doesn't read, speak, or listen. It just processes inputs and follows algorithms. Is this computer using real knowledge of English, or is it just mimicking what understanding looks like? Now think of the Mandarin speaker again. She follows rules. She sees symbols and puts them into groups. The The symbols have no meaning for her. Yet, by rule following alone, she sorts the sentences as well as someone who speaks English. The paradox is this. We want to say she doesn't know English, but we also want to say she demonstrates knowledge of English grammar. We're stuck between two truths that won't sit together. The heart of the paradox is in what we mean by knowledge. If knowledge means getting the right answer, then the Mandarin speaker knows English grammar. If knowledge means understanding what the words mean, then she doesn't. But can you have one without the other? This leads to a deeper problem. What does it mean to understand anything? When you say you understand a language, do you mean you can use it? Do you mean you can explain it? Do you mean it makes sense in your mind? Each of these definitions points in a different direction. Say someone hands you a guitar, you press a button, and it plays a perfect song. Did the guitar understand the song? No, it just followed instructions. But when a person plays the song by memory, we say they understand it. The sound might be the same, but the process is different. Now imagine a classroom. A teacher gives a grammar worksheet to two students. One is fluent in English. The other only speaks Mandarin, but has a copy of a secret answer key written in symbols she understands. They both get every question right. To the teacher, they seem equal, but only one understands the language. The other is solving a puzzle without knowing the bigger picture. This is the core of the Mandarin paradox. It forces us to ask if following the right steps is enough. Is doing the task the same as knowing how and why the task works? It's not a small question. It touches everything from artificial intelligence to how we teach kids. In computer science, people talk about syntax and semantics. Syntax is the structure, how symbols are put together. Semantics is the meaning, what those symbols stand for. Computers are great at syntax. They can parse code, match patterns, and flag errors. But do they understand semantics? The Mandarin paradox suggests they don't. A machine might pass a grammar test without knowing any language at all. Just like the Mandarin speaker who can sort English sentences. But now consider a real-world example. Translation apps are everywhere. You type in a sentence, and the app gives you another sentence in a new language. Often the output is useful. The grammar checks out. The words fit the context. But the app doesn't know what you're trying to say in any human sense. It processes input and gives output. It performs well without true understanding. This brings us back to the room. The person inside the room does not understand what the symbols mean. But if the symbols are always responded to correctly, is there a difference between the person and a real language speaker? Some people say yes. They argue that understanding must come from experience, intention, and awareness. A person knows what a dog is because they've seen one, played with one, maybe even feared one. A machine or a rule follower in a room never had that. So even if they get the answer right, it's not the same. It can't be. Others say no. They claim that if all the answers are correct, then it doesn't matter how you got there. They argue that intelligence is what intelligence does. If you can sort sentences like a native speaker, you are, for all practical purposes, showing the same kind of intelligence. The Mandarin paradox doesn't give us a final answer. It sits in the middle. It asks us to look again at what we think we know. It forces a split between performance and comprehension, between appearance and reality, between rules and meaning. Imagine now a world where everyone speaks a different language. To survive, they all learn to follow the same set of signs and rules. They don't understand each other's words, but they act in ways that look like they do. From the outside, it looks like communication, but on the inside, it's just pattern matching. That's the world the Mandarin paradox makes us imagine. A world where we cannot always trust what understanding looks like. Where doing the task might not mean knowing the task. Where sorting the sentence does not prove that the sentence makes sense to you. And yet, in our world, we often rely on exactly these kinds of systems. Grammar checkers, auto-translators, chatbots. They all perform tasks that seem to require understanding. The Mandarin paradox reminds us that performance is not the same thing as comprehension. It pushes us to ask, what are we building? What are we teaching? What counts as knowing? When you see a correct answer, it's easy to assume there's knowledge behind it. But the paradox warns us not to jump too fast. There may be nothing behind the answer, but a set of rules, followed without meaning. The symbols go in, the symbols come out, and we mistake the process for thought. Kafka's Toxin Puzzle is a thought experiment about intention and motivation. It tests whether you can truly intend to do something when there's no reason to do it once the reward is secured. The scenario is simple, but it pulls apart how we think about choice, commitment, and belief in action. Here's how it goes. A billionaire offers you a deal. If, by midnight tonight, you form the intention to drink a toxin tomorrow, they'll wire $1 million to your account. You don't need to actually drink it. The money is yours just for forming the intention. The toxin will make you sick for a day, but won't cause lasting harm. If you drink it, you'll feel miserable for 24 hours. The catch is this: the billionaire can tell if you really intend to drink the toxin. They're not mind reading, but they have some way, say brain scans or behavior observation, that lets them reliably detect sincere intentions. Here's the problem. When midnight comes, if you've really formed the intention to drink the toxin, you get the money. But once you have the money, there's no reason left to drink it. You've already been paid. And since drinking the toxin gives you no benefit, it seems irrational to go through with it. So the question is, can you really intend to do something you know you'll have no reason to do once the reward is secured? To work through it, it helps to think about what it means to intend something. Intending isn't just saying you'll do something. It's a mental commitment. When you intend to do X, you usually plan for it, prepare for it, and feel that it's the action you'll take. It's tied to your beliefs and your reasons. Most of the time, you intend something because you believe it will help you reach a goal. Here, though, the reward isn't tied to the action. It's tied to the intention before the action. The reward isn't tied to the action. It's tied to the intention before the action. Once the intention is formed and the reward is given, the reason for the action disappears. That creates a split between the reason for intending and the reason for doing. You intend in order to get the money. But once you get it, drinking the toxins serves no purpose. If you're rational, you won't drink it. But if you're rational and know that, you also know right now that future you won't go through with it. And if you know that, then you can't honestly intend to do it. The billionaire's test will detect this. You fail. Suppose you try to game the system. You think, I'll just try to believe I'll do it. You rehearse it. You tell yourself you'll drink it. You imagine waking up tomorrow and going through with it. But somewhere inside, you know you're faking it. You don't really believe you'll do it. You're trying to form an intention, but you can't force belief like that. Your knowledge of tomorrow blocks you. It's like trying to believe there's a chair in the room when you clearly see there isn't. You can imagine it, you can say it, but you don't believe it. People sometimes compare this to New Year's resolutions. You say you'll go to the gym every day, you feel like you mean it, but part of you doubts it. That's different though. In that case, you want to form the intention, and the reward is tied to the action. You'll be healthier, you'll feel better. There's something in it for you if you follow through. Here, the action gives you nothing. There's no long-term benefit to drinking the toxin. No one else will know. You've already got the million. So the only reason to drink it is if you still care about having meant it. Some try to make it work through self-binding. You might think, I'll drink it no matter what. I'll force myself. Maybe you set an alarm, prep the glass, leave reminders. But if you know this is all mechanical, not driven by sincere intention, it still doesn't help. The billionaire's detector picks up sincerity, not ritual. You can't cheat the intention. Others suggest trying to become the kind of person who follows through no matter what. Maybe you've trained yourself to stick to intentions just for the sake of it. But even then, the puzzle asks, is this enough? Is it possible to will yourself into a true intention when your reasons dry up the moment you succeed? Another angle is to separate belief from intention. Maybe you don't believe you'll drink it, but you still intend to. This is a tough sell. Intention usually rides on belief. If you intend to go to the store, it's because you think you will. If you believe you won't, the intention falls apart. So trying to intend what you don't believe you'll do is like trying to walk north and south at the same time. You might want to intend, but wanting isn't the same as doing. It also shows a strange gap in motivation. If you told someone you'd pay them to want to go to the dentist, they might say they want to. But it wouldn't be a real desire. Same with intention. You can say the words, feel some pressure, go through motions. But if your reasons vanish, so does the core of the intention. You might try to fool yourself. Maybe you plan to drink it and avoid thinking about the money. You focus on the toxin and decide to act as if the money never came. But deep down, you know you're not doing this for the action. You're doing it to get the money, and once that's done, your motivation dies. That knowledge leaks into your present mind. You can't hide it from yourself. The loop closes. You can't form the real intention because you know tomorrow, you won't carry it out. There's also a weird time angle. Normally, your future plans guide your actions. You intend now because you see what you'll do later. But in this case, the moment you look ahead and see no action, your present intention crumbles. You're trying to build a bridge with no other side. You might build scaffolding, imagine it there, hope it holds, but when you look closely, there's nothing to land on. Think of a kid being told, "Pretend you'll eat broccoli tomorrow, and I'll give you ice cream now." The kid nods, maybe even tries to mean it, but unless the kid actually expects to eat the broccoli, it's just a performance. That's what Kafka's puzzle catches, the difference between performance and genuine intent. The puzzle doesn't just ask whether it's logical to drink the toxin. It asks whether it's possible to form an intention when your reasons are temporary. Most of our decisions tie intention to action through benefit. Here, the benefit comes only from holding a mental state for a moment, then dropping it. And we're just not built to do that in good faith. At least, not without conflict. Kafka's toxin puzzle shows that we can't always intend what we have no reason to do. Even if we want the reward, and even if the cost is small, we can't make ourselves believe we'll act when we know we won't. Intention depends on belief, and belief depends on reasons. Without reasons, the whole thing collapses. You get stuck in a loop where the more rational you are, the harder it is to convince yourself to follow through.